I'm Anna, 33 years old, born and raised in a small town in Pennsylvania. I realized early on that my place in the family was nothing more than a faint shadow next to my perfect younger brother, Tyler. Tyler is 2 years younger than me, but from the day he was born, my parents, Evelyn and Martin, seemed to forget I existed. And when I was little, whenever I got high grades or praise from teachers, my parents would barely mumble a few words. But if Tyler simply passed a test, the whole house felt like it threw a party. I lost count of the times I stood quietly in the corner, holding a certificate of achievement, while no one even looked up. The favoritism didn't stop at words. On birthdays, Tyler always had big parties and expensive gifts, while I received just because presents, discounted t-shirts or cheap notebooks. I still remember the time I got a pair of gray socks, while Tyler got a brand new mountain bike. When I turned away to wipe my tears, my mom casually said, "Girls don't need bikes." Growing up in that environment, I learned to shrink into myself. Not to ask, not to expect. Tyler, on the other hand, became arrogant, used to getting everything without effort. It got even worse after he married Stephanie. A woman, I swear, could turn anyone into the villain with just a few tears. Stephanie was pretty and had a special talent, playing the victim. She could turn the smallest incident into a disaster to gain sympathy. If anyone dared to push back, Stephanie would burst into tears, shifting all blame onto them. Of course, my parents, who always saw Tyler as a treasure, never bothered to see the truth. They treated Stephanie like their own daughter, defending her no matter what. Stephanie didn't bother to get a job, even though she had a college degree. Tyler had to work himself to exhaustion to support the entire family, while my mom happily babysat their 3 young kids every day. My parents' old 3-bedroom house was always loud and cramped, with kids and Stephanie's endless complaints about how hard her life was. And me? I chose a different path. After graduating from college, I moved out, worked hard, and climbed up to a management position at a furniture company. I avoided going home as much as possible because every time I did, I felt like a stranger. Last year, when the pandemic hit, my company had to downsize. I lost my job after a short email. Not long after, I also had to leave my rented apartment because I couldn't afford it anymore. Desperate, I gathered all my courage and called my parents, hoping to stay a few months until I found a new job. I remember that conversation clearly. My mom picked up, and the moment I finished explaining, she burst out laughing like I had just told a joke. "This house is already full, Anna," she said coldly. "We can't add another mouth to feed." I was speechless. Somewhere in the background, I heard Stephanie's smug voice. "She better get used to the real world. It's called growing up." Tyler, the same brother I once shared every slice of cake and toy with, just shrugged when I looked at him, his eyes empty, as if he didn't even know who I was, and walked out of my parents' house with nothing but a battered suitcase and the little savings left in my bank account. I had nowhere to go. My old apartment was gone, and my friends lived in tiny places where they couldn't take anyone in. In desperation, I drove my 2005 Ford Ranger to a Walmart parking lot. From that day on, my beat-up truck with an old camper became my only home. I bought it off a classified site for $1,500, 0 cents. Everything I had left after paying my last bills. At first, I comforted myself that it was temporary. 1 week, 2 weeks, then 3 months passed. I learned to shower at the gym, use gas station restrooms, and charge my phone at cheap coffee shops. Every night, I parked in quiet neighborhoods, praying no one would call the cops about a suspicious vehicle. On freezing winter nights, I wore 3 layers and curled up in a thin sleeping bag, listening to the wind howling through the thin walls of my camper. On sweltering summer mornings, I'd wake up drenched in sweat before the sun even rose. But the hardest part wasn't the weather. It was the looks of disgust from people passing by, seeing me crawl out of that old camper. I thought about giving up, crawling back to my parents for forgiveness and enduring their contempt just to have a roof over my head. But every time I pictured Stephanie's smug face, arms crossed, mocking me, I gripped the steering wheel tighter and told myself no. I'd rather live like this than be their puppet. I applied for jobs everywhere. Restaurants, convenience stores, supermarkets, anywhere with a help wanted sign. Dozens of failed interviews, hundreds of rejections. I never gave up. I smiled more, spoke more confidently, and worked on standing tall. Finally, one scorching September afternoon, I got a call from a small interior design company in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. The only place willing to give me a chance after hearing my story. The starting pay was just enough to survive, but to me, it was a lifeline. I threw myself into work, taking every extra hour available, from customer service to warehouse support. I worked non-stop, all day, and crawled back into my suffocating camper at night for a few hours of sleep. Every single paycheck, I saved. I cut all unnecessary expenses. Homemade sandwiches, old clothes, no spending a single dollar frivolously. Every time I felt discouraged, I told myself, one day, I'll walk into a house of my own, built with these very hands. 12 months into my new job, I saw a small 3-bedroom house for sale in the suburbs of Beaver. It was old, the backyard was overgrown, and the outside walls were peeling. But to me, it was more beautiful than any mansion. The asking price was $92,000. Way more than I had. But I didn't quit. I applied for a loan, presented my pay stubs and a solid repayment plan, and luckily the bank approved me with a manageable interest rate. I poured all my savings into the down payment, and on a crisp fall afternoon, I finally held the keys to my very first home. When I moved in, it was just me, an old backpack, an air mattress, and a pride so overwhelming that I cried right there on the bare living room floor. I walked barefoot on the old wooden floors, touched every worn wall, whispering, I finally have a place of my own. Parked my old camper in the backyard as a reminder of where I started and how far I had come. Every time I looked out the window and saw the camper's lights twinkling, I smiled. I had survived my darkest days, and for the first time in my life, I knew I was on the right path. I hadn't even had time to fully enjoy my newfound peace when trouble came knocking again. One Saturday afternoon, as I was scrubbing the floors, the doorbell rang urgently. I cracked open the door and nearly froze when I saw my parents, Tyler, Stephanie, and their 3 kids standing on my porch. Without waiting for an invitation, they barged right in like they owned the place. My mom scanned the living room with a satisfied smile, as if inspecting her new property. Stephanie sneered at me with her usual disdain. Well, Anna, my mom said after a strange, heavy silence, this house seems a bit too big for a lonely girl like you, doesn't it? I clenched my fists. My instincts screamed this wasn't going to end well. Tyler flopped onto the couch, rubbing his belly like he'd just eaten, then launched into a monologue about traffic, work, and how the kids needed space. Stephanie chimed in, her voice sweet but icy. Given the situation, we think it's best if we move in. You still have your camper out back, right? I stood there, stunned. What do you mean? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. We live in the house, Tyler said casually. You can move back into your camper. You're used to it anyway. Besides, he shrugged. You don't need this much space just for yourself. I stared at them, a tidal wave of rage and bitterness rising inside me. Where were they when I was sleeping in a parking lot? When I needed shelter, they laughed and slammed the door in my face. And now, when I finally had something of my own, they acted like it was theirs for the taking. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. No, this is my house. You don't get to decide. Tyler's face darkened. Stephanie shot up from the couch, arms crossed, voice shrill. You're so selfish, Anna. Your family needs you. Are you seriously going to let the kids stay cramped in your parents' old house? My parents? I turned to look at them, hoping they'd say something fair. But they stayed silent, eyes avoiding mine, silently siding with Tyler. No, Anna, my father said, his voice low and cold as steel. Don't make this difficult. This is your family. I laughed, a bitter foreign sound even to my own ears. Where was my family when I needed them? When I was sleeping in my truck in the middle of winter? What were you doing? Don't talk to me about family. The air grew so heavy it was hard to breathe. Stephanie stormed toward me, her face flushed with rage. Before I could react, she slapped me hard across the face, whipping my head to the side. You deserve that for being so selfish, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. I touched my burning cheek, feeling the mark her hand had left. Years of swallowing pain, staying silent, all shattered in that instant. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I quietly pulled out my phone, dialed 911, and spoke clearly. I need the police. I've been assaulted, and there are intruders at my home. The moment they realized I was calling the police, they all snapped out of it. Tyler stuttered, trying to pull Stephanie back. My parents' faces went ghostly pale. I kept the phone to my ear, my eyes locked on them. Leave my house immediately. If you're still here when the police arrive, you'll be explaining yourselves to them. Stephanie threw a tantrum, cursing under her breath. Tyler tried weakly to smooth things over, but I didn't budge. This was my house. No one was taking it from me ever again. The police arrived in under 10 minutes. I showed them footage from the security camera by my front door. Everything. From the moment they barged in to the moment Stephanie hit me. The officers gave me a sympathetic look and politely ordered them to leave my property immediately. Before she left, my mother shot me one last look, full of anger and bitter disappointment, as if I were the traitor. I didn't care. I hadn't betrayed them. They had abandoned me long ago. I thought that would be the end of it, but 3 days later, after a long shift at work, I came home and froze. The locks had been changed, strange furniture was crammed into my living room, and my beloved camper had been dragged out to the curb. I ran to the door and banged on it. It swung open, and there stood Tyler and Stephanie, triumphant like they had just conquered a kingdom. What are you doing here? Stephanie asked, her voice sickeningly sweet. This is our home now. I stiffened, trying to stay calm. What the hell are you two doing here? Tyler shrugged and held up a stack of papers he had printed from somewhere. We have a legal lease agreement. You signed it, Anna. I snatched the papers and glanced over them. A sloppy forgery, the signature nothing like mine. It was laughable, how bad they were at even faking documents. Don't waste your time, sis, Stephanie sneered. We're settled in. You can go back to your little camper. I turned around, pulled out my phone, and called the police immediately. Hearing me give the address and explain there were intruders, Stephanie panicked and slammed the door. I sat on the steps, clutching my phone, fury boiling inside me. This was my house, the house I earned through sleepless nights, skipped meals, and months freezing in a camper. No one, not even blood relatives, had the right to take it away from me. About 15 minutes later, a police car pulled up. 2 officers approached calmly. I explained everything, from the changed locks to the forged lease. It took several hard knocks before Tyler and Stephanie finally opened the door. Tyler looked sour. Stephanie clutched her non-existent baby bump, trying to play for sympathy. I pulled out my phone and showed them security footage from the porch cam. Footage of them breaking the lock, hauling furniture inside, and installing a new lock. There was no way to deny it. The officers exchanged a look and nodded. One turned to Tyler and Stephanie, his voice firm. You are trespassing on private property. That's a criminal offense, Tyler stammered, waving the fake lease like a shield. But one glance was all it took for the officer to ask, We'll need to verify the signature against official ID. Anna, may we see your ID? I handed them my driver's license. The signature was nothing like the fake. No more words were needed. The officers immediately ordered them to pack up and leave or face arrest for trespassing and forgery. Stephanie started bawling, clinging to one officer's arm, begging. Tyler's face turned red as he shouted in desperation, but this time, no one stood up for them. I stood quietly, watching as they dragged box after box out of my house, suitcases, kids' toys they had no right to bring in. I saw the rage on Tyler's face, the angry tears streaming down Stephanie's cheeks. But inside, I felt nothing but cold resolve. The house was cleared out in heavy, angry silence. Before leaving, Stephanie spat one last line at me, full of venom. "You'll regret this." I didn't respond. I simply closed the door in their faces, shutting out years of pain and betrayal. When they were finally gone, I collapsed onto the floor and exhaled deeply. My old camper still sat steady in the backyard, like a symbol of everything I had endured. I knew this wasn't over yet. But at least for today, I had protected what was mine. After the door closed, I realized this wasn't just about changing the locks. If I stayed silent, they would spin lies until they became truth in the family's eyes. I had stayed silent for too long. This time, I wasn't letting them control the story. That night, hands still trembling from rage and determination, I opened my laptop. I wrote a long post on Facebook, where all the extended family could see it. I laid it all out, start to finish. Being rejected when I was unemployed, the cruel words, Tyler and Stephanie breaking into my house, forging a lease, and being forced out by police. I didn't exaggerate or accuse falsely. I attached photos, security footage, and copies of the police report. I even posted side-by-side images of the forged signature and my real one for everyone to see the blatant fraud. At the end, I wrote, "I've stayed silent long enough. This is the truth. Believe it or not, but I will not let anyone trample over my life again." Within an hour, the post exploded. Comments and messages flooded in nonstop. Some relatives, the ones I thought would defend my parents and Tyler, openly expressed their outrage. They sent me messages of support, saying I did the right thing by standing up for myself. A few older relatives who had witnessed the favoritism when I was younger also spoke up. They shared memories of me being neglected while Tyler was treated like a prince. Memories I thought were buried resurfaced, bringing both pain and relief. As the night wore on, more and more people voiced their anger. Some even asked for the town sheriff's number to verify everything. An aunt from Arizona privately messaged me, "Anna, you should have spoken out long ago. We're proud of you." Meanwhile, I heard through the grapevine that my parents and Tyler were scrambling to control the damage. They posted a weak statement, trying to paint me as a bitter liar, the bad daughter who turned her back on family. But this time, no one believed them. The evidence was too clear. Their excuses only made them look ridiculous. Stephanie, predictably, posted passive-aggressive rants about forgiveness and family sacrifices. But no one pitied her. In fact, many people left blunt comments under her posts, demanding she apologized for her disgraceful behavior. Soon after, I got a call from Aunt Lucy, the aunt I had always loved. Her voice trembled as she said, "Anna, if you ever need a place to stay or anything at all, come to my house. Don't let them make you think you're unworthy of love." For the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost: recognition and support from my extended family. The next morning, I woke up to hundreds of messages, congratulations, encouragement, and even a few small gifts. A cousin I barely spoke to sent me an online gift card with a note, "A little housewarming gift. You deserve it." Standing alone in my empty living room, sunlight pouring through the old windows, I felt a peace I had never known before. I had spoken the truth. I had stood up for myself. And this time, I wasn't alone. The real storm hit just a few months after I went public. In a small town like ours, rumors spread like wildfire, and soon whispers about my family were everywhere. Tyler and Stephanie, once the golden child and perfect daughter-in-law, became the laughingstock. They were still crammed into my parents' tiny house, A house that now felt even smaller with 3 unruly kids, constant arguments, and simmering resentment. Tyler's usual arrogance disappeared. Stephanie, who once walked around like the world owed her, now kept her head down in public. Their finances took a nosedive. Tyler worked nonstop, but his paycheck barely fed all those mouths. Stephanie still refused to work, claiming she had to take care of the kids, but that wasn't the worst blow. One spring morning, the final bombshell dropped. Stephanie's affair was exposed. Rumors spread that she had been seeing a bartender just a few blocks from home. At first, Tyler didn't believe it. Despite everything, I knew he had once loved her, foolishly, but that changed when Tyler secretly ran a DNA test on their youngest child. The results were undeniable. The child wasn't his. The news was like a final blow to whatever pride Tyler had left. The day he received the results, he didn't say a word. He just stood, frozen in our parents' front yard, crumpled paper in hand, his face blank as if his whole world had collapsed. Stephanie, as always, tried to spin the situation. She cried, begged, swore it was just one mistake, that she still loved Tyler, that this family was everything to her. But this time, her tears didn't work. Tyler filed for divorce that same week. I heard about it from Aunt Lucy, who quietly kept me updated. According to her, Tyler hired a good lawyer and presented all the evidence. The DNA results and messages between Stephanie and her lover. In court, Stephanie tried to portray herself as a devoted mother sacrificing for her family, but her lies unraveled quickly. The judge not only denied her request for child support, but also agreed to have Tyler's name removed from the youngest child's birth certificate. The divorce was finalized faster than expected. Tyler got custody of the 2 older kids, while Stephanie walked away with nothing, no support, no settlement. On the day the divorce was finalized, Tyler moved out of our parents' house, taking the 2 kids and a suitcase of old clothes. He rented a small apartment in a cheap suburb, living quietly like he wanted to disappear from the town's gossip. As for Stephanie, after losing her reputation and financial support, she was coldly kicked out by my parents, the same people who once adored her. I heard she had to move back in with her own family, over 100 miles away. The youngest child, the one who wasn't Tyler's, went with her. Everything happened so fast that even I, who thought they would cling to whatever they could, was stunned. But what surprised me more was the emptiness I felt. Not joy, not satisfaction, just a deep, quiet void. Maybe because deep down, I had once hoped for a different ending, a change, an awakening, a sincere apology. But life isn't a fairy tale, and the price for years of lies and selfishness came due in the harshest way. I thought that after all this, only a cold, unfixable distance would remain between me and my family. But sometimes life takes strange turns, even with people you believe will never change. One morning in June, while I was watering my garden, an old car pulled up in front of my house. Tyler got out first, walking slowly like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. My parents followed, no longer carrying the pride they once wore so easily. They looked older, every wrinkle carved deep into their faces that used to beam with smugness. Tyler approached, holding a small gift box, unable to meet my eyes. I stood there with my arms crossed, strangely calm. "Anna," Tyler started, hesitantly. I don't even know where to begin, but I owe you an apology." I stayed silent, waiting. "I treated you terribly. When you needed family the most, I turned my back. I thought because you were always strong, you didn't need anyone. I was wrong." I looked at Tyler, not the arrogant brother I once knew, but a man humbled by bitter mistakes. My mother stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for mine. "Anna, I'm sorry," she said, tears filling her eyes. "I was blind, favoring Tyler all those years. I know I can't undo what I did, but I hope you'll give me a chance to make it right." My father, A man I had never once heard apologize finally spoke, his voice raspy. "I was wrong, Anna. I admit it. If there's any chance, I want to start over." I stood there, numb. Part of me wanted to lash out, to throw every buried resentment at them, but another part, a much quieter part, just felt tired. I had survived it all. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. Tyler held out the gift box. We've started going to church the past few months. I've learned that forgiveness sometimes isn't for others. It's for yourself. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I hope, one day, you might. I took the box and opened it. Inside was a handwritten card, Tyler's familiar, messy scrawl. "Even if it's late, I still hope to call you my sister again." Tears filled my eyes before I even realized it. I turned away, hiding the softness I had fought so hard to protect. "All right," I said, my voice thick. "But things won't go back to the way they were. And it'll take time for me to trust again. We understand." My mom nodded. "We're not asking for that. We just want a new beginning. An honest one." From that day, my family really did change. Tyler started bringing the two kids to visit every weekend, always letting me know ahead of time. My mom sent little text messages, small but genuine check-ins. My dad, though still a man of few words, would always nod when he saw me, a nod heavier with meaning than 100 fancy speeches. I stayed cautious. A scar, even when healed, still leaves a mark. But for the first time in years, I saw the possibility of a new chapter, one without constant bitterness and blame. One night, standing on my porch, watching the warm glow of the living room lights, I thought, sometimes the greatest miracle isn't an apology. It's someone truly changing because they know they were wrong. Stephanie, after the divorce and the scandal, nearly vanished from town for a while. I heard she moved back with her parents about 70 miles away. But even from a distance, she refused to let me go. Her life fell apart faster than I imagined. Without a husband to support her and without Tyler's parents backing her, Stephanie had to find a job. But with a reputation ruined by the public scandal and a history that followed her online, no employer wanted her. The old posts, the ugly comments from townspeople, they lingered like a permanent stain. Frustrated and unemployed, she ended up stuck at her parents' house, living off their small retirement checks. Slowly, even the relatives who once defended her backed away. Everyone saw her for what she really was: selfish, lazy, shameless. I thought it would all fade, quietly. But I underestimated the bitterness Stephanie harbored. One late fall night, while I was sleeping, my home security system blared an alarm. I jolted awake and checked the live stream, and nearly dropped my phone when I saw a hooded figure creeping toward my truck. The figure, quick and clumsy, pulled a carton of eggs from a backpack and hurled them at my truck, eggs bursting and dripping down the windshield and hood. After the vandalism, the figure ran off into the dark. I immediately called the police. When they arrived, I showed them the video footage. Even with the hoodie, I instantly recognized her. Stephanie's height, gait, and posture were unmistakable. The officers gathered evidence quickly. I filed charges for property vandalism and requested a restraining order. The case moved faster than I expected. With undeniable video evidence and a documented history of conflict, the judge wasted no time. Stephanie was fined for vandalizing private property and ordered to pay for the cleaning and repairs. More importantly, the court granted a 3-year restraining order. Stephanie couldn't come within 300 feet of me or contact me in any way, in person, by phone, mail, or online. The day the order was issued, Stephanie stood in court, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. I, dressed neatly in my business suit, stared at her like she was a stranger behind a pane of glass, distant, emotionless. News of the incident spread quickly. The town buzzed with gossip about the disgraceful egg attack, and Stephanie's already shattered image crumbled even further. She had tried so hard to portray herself as a devoted mother, a victim of family power games. Now, all anyone saw was a bitter, defeated woman who destroyed herself. I knew Stephanie would probably always blame me, but I didn't care. I did what I had to do to protect myself and the home I fought so hard to build. One weekend afternoon, sipping coffee on my porch, feeling the crisp fall breeze, I looked out at my truck parked peacefully under the golden sun. No more fear of sabotage, no more tiptoeing around threats. Since Stephanie's restraining order, my life became truly peaceful. No more midnight doorbell rings, no more vandalism. I could simply enjoy quiet mornings on my porch, sunlight filtering through the leaves, with a peace I had never known before. Realizing my 3-bedroom house was too big for just me, I decided to rent out the 2 spare rooms. Not long after, I found 2 ideal tenants. Megan, a young night shift nurse at a nearby hospital, and Chris, a construction engineer who traveled often. Both were respectful, independent, and valued privacy. The rental income covered most of my mortgage. For the first time in my life, I felt financially stable. I still worked regularly, but without the crushing pressure. My savings steadily grew, and with every dollar added, my sense of freedom deepened. On weekends, my cozy house often filled with the laughter of children. Tyler, trying hard to rebuild the bond, brought his 2 older kids over. They needed space to play, to feel family again. The kids warmed up to me quickly. 8-year-old Emma loved drawing in the living room, while 10-year-old Max was obsessed with the old game console I found at a flea market. I planted sunflowers taller than the kids in the backyard, and they dubbed it their secret forest. One afternoon, as I was fixing the old backyard swing, Max looked up at me and asked innocently, "Sivo, Anna, why do you live alone? Aren't you lonely?" I laughed, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Not at all. Living alone has its own joys. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want." Emma hugged my arm and whispered, "I love coming to your house. It's way more fun than Grandma's." Their innocent words warmed my heart. This house wasn't just a shelter. It was a place where I rebuilt my life, where I chose how to live, no longer under anyone's shadow. Tyler often invited me to his small family dinners, just him and the kids. Sometimes I went, keeping a healthy distance. Our relationship was healing, but the old scars remained. I no longer resented him, but I also couldn't pretend the hurt had never existed. My parents changed too. They no longer showed up unannounced or made demands. Our brief encounters, sometimes just a handshake or a simple holiday greeting, were enough for me. I no longer needed anything more, just respect and safe boundaries. One time, my mom stared wistfully at my house and sighed, "Anna, you did it. You built a life of your own." I simply smiled, saying nothing, because deep down, I knew that long overdue recognition was the greatest victory of all. That winter, Emma, Max, and I set up a Christmas tree outside. We decorated it with colorful ornaments, twinkling lights, and handmade crafts. When the lights turned on, the whole street glowed. I stood back, watching the kids laugh under the sparkling lights, my heart full of simple, quiet joy. I had lost a lot to get here, but now I had a home, freedom, and a small family of my own, made up of the innocent children, kind friends, and most importantly, myself. My story isn't just about overcoming family injustice. It's proof of perseverance and belief in oneself. From a cast-off, ridiculed, manipulated person, I rebuilt my life with my own 2 hands. A home, financial freedom, and genuine love from those who deserved it. The past left scars, but it also taught me to cherish the present. I didn't just reclaim my life. I found true peace. What do you think about Anna's journey and how she took her life back? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories and powerful life lessons.